Hey, I'm Brian Goulet of the Goulet Pen Company, and I have a pen here called the X750 by a company called Jinhao. This is a brand that comes out of China. Very interesting, and this is not a pen that's really widely available here in the US. You can get them from some places on eBay and some other smaller retailers, you know, we're carrying this pen now at thegouletpens.com, and so I thought I would shoot a video to introduce it to you, tell you some of its features. It's a great value pen. If you're on the Fountain Pen Network, you've probably seen some reviews of this pen and stuff. It's been talked about for a little bit, but we decided to bring it kind of to the forefront and introduce it to the world here in video form. So that's what I'm going to do here today, introduce to you the Jinhao X750. I'd first heard about Jinhao a couple of years ago. It was on my radar because I'd seen some reviews of it on the Fountain Pen Network. It seemed to be kind of a solid pen. However, it wasn't really my taste at the time, and the only places that you could find them were, you know, a couple of places on eBay that were just, you know, people I'd never heard of. So I didn't really want to buy from them. So I eventually, you know, kind of more and more people had asked about them, and I've always been interested in getting value pens. You know, I've had pens like the Pilot Metropolitan and stuff that have recently come up that have really caught my interest, and so that's how this pen really was kind of brought to the forefront in my mind. So finally went ahead and got some different Jinhao models, and one of the ones I got was the 750, and I was really kind of blown away. A bunch of people in the office here at Goulet Pens tried it, and we were all just really blown away with the quality, especially given the price. So we decided to go ahead and carry it, and that's why I'm making this video here, is because we're retailing the pens. So of course, take a review of that in mind. However, I think that this is a great brand. It's got not as much exposure out there on the internet as I think it deserves. So I wanted to make this video to get this information to you, show you what this pen is all about, and show you all its features. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and check it out. The Jinhao X750 here comes in this beautiful plastic sleeve. Because it comes directly out of China and doesn't have a distributor per se, there isn't like any standardized box or anything that comes with it. So it just comes in this sleeve. Some retailers may choose to put it in a box, so you may see some inconsistencies online as far as what retailers are offering, but that's how it comes. So that's how we're offering it, because we didn't want to get a box and just have to, you know, most of the boxes get thrown away anyway, so we just figured it was unnecessary. So anyway, this is the pen. There are several different colors out there, actually a whole bunch of them, but the only ones that I have in my hand right now are these guys, the matte black ones. There's other colors like the sparkly one, and there's a silver one that we're gonna carry, but we got back ordered on it, and I didn't really want to wait to put out a video until I got those in, so I'm just shooting it just with this pen today. So it's a matte black. It's got this chrome trim here, which is nice. The pen itself, some of the key features of this pen are that it is made of all metal. It's got a good amount of weight to it. So if you like to use, you know, smaller pens and lighter pens, this is not a small and light pen. This is a pretty good size one. My hand's a pretty good size, and this pen, you know, fills my hand, feels very comfortable in it. That said, I don't think it's going to be completely a loss for somebody who likes a smaller pen. It's got a number 6 size nib, which, you know, there's a bunch of pens out there. Noodler's pens, Edison's, Monteverde, TWSBI VAC 700. You know, there's a lot of pens out there that have a number 6 size, so I think you might be familiar with those if you've seen, you know, a bunch of pens. And so this pen is right in there with that. And one of the coolest things about this pen is that you can just pull the nib and the feed right out of there. It's friction fit inside, so if you want to swap out, it's easy. It's got this little flat part down here that you got to put it back into. I'll probably do a separate video just on how to swap out those nibs. But anyway, just know that that can be done if you're familiar with how to do it with Edison's, Monteverde's, whatever. Similar process as those. And the nice thing about that is, even though this pen, I only have it in a medium nib, it is technically available in a fine nib, but you know, because of quantities that I had to buy these things in, I wasn't able to get both fine and medium, so I just went with medium. But the nice thing about the fact you can swap out these nibs, I promise I'm getting to the point, is that you can easily swap it out. You know, got Goulet nibs or other brands that are, you know, number 6 size. You can stick it in this pen and it'll work great. So it's a standard nib size, and that'll definitely enhance the utility of what would normally be a more limited nib selection with Jinhao. So, I want to show you the pen up close, give you some detail. There's nothing fancy going on in the finial, it's just that same kind of matte black. It's a metal anodized kind of feel if you're familiar with the Pilot Metropolitan at all. It's the exact same kind of finish as the Metropolitan. The clip itself is this kind of classy teardrop shape. It's got this little triangle doohickey thing on there, just a little accent piece. So that's kind of nice. It's very simple kind of design, nothing too crazy going on with the clip. I will say that the clip is very hard. So if I can do this easily, the clip is really stiff, really stiff. So if you want a pen that's really easy to use on your shirt, you know, this probably won't be it. The clip is almost something I wouldn't recommend using because it's that tight. Maybe it'll loosen up, maybe you could wiggle it loose or whatever. The center band here says Jinhao, and then it's got a bunch of embellishments, and it says X750 right there on the center band, which the center band is kind of raised up from the rest of the cap. The rest of the pen itself is pretty straightforward. It's got this little silver ring, and then you know, just the finial on the back is the same as the rest of the pen. And then the grip is the same, that metal anodized kind of stuff. It does not have any threads because it's a snap cap, so it's a little more comfortable to hold. Some people I know that the threads are kind of a pain point if your thumb rests right on it. This one, there is a step that you have to worry about, but it's really not that bad. So I think, especially because the grip is, you know, fairly good length, I don't think it's going to be a problem. And then the nib itself says Jinhao, and then it's got their logo and this little kind of filigree thing on the outside. And then it says 18K GP. Don't really know why, because this particular nib is not gold plated. However, their two-tone nibs are gold plated, so I don't really know why. They probably just didn't change the stamping or whatever. So, you know, it's just one of those things. And then here's the feed on the back. The feed is, you know, plastic feed, kind of familiar to what you may see on a lot of other pens with a number 6 size nib. And then the pen itself has a converter in it. So it's probably a different converter, you'll notice, than some of the other ones that you may have seen. It is standard international, so that's kind of nice. So you can use standard international cartridges with it. And it has this converter, which is I've only seen this with a Jinhao pen. These are the converters that you see with most of the other standard international pens, especially ones coming out of Europe and whatnot. So they look a little bit different. Now, the end is the same, so it'll both fit on the pen, but if you look at them side by side, you can see that the plunger in the, you know, the one with the metal accents here, that one, the plunger is further back, so you actually have a greater ink capacity in your, I'll call it your standard converter, than with this plastic Jinhao one. So, you know, it's plastic, it's cheap, it's on a cheap pen, so it's not going to be anything that you would expect to blow your mind. Just this converter here is $5, so it's half the price of the whole Jinhao pen, so you could guess that having a little bit cheaper converter is not anything that I think is too shameful. I'm surprised they include a converter at all, to be quite honest with you. So for what it is, it gets the job done though. It's nothing that I think it's not going to outlast this one, but it'll do for now. And just in case you're wondering, this one, even though it is longer than the plastic one overall, it does still fit inside the pen, closes properly and everything. So if you have a bunch of these laying around, or if you want to get a replacement, get an upgrade, whatever, you can totally do that over the one that comes with it, and it'll still fit. It's cross-compatible, works just fine. So that's kind of cool. Some of the key things about this pen that I think are the major selling points: the pen is extremely durable, it's really tough, it's pretty heavy, so that is, you know, may or may not be a selling point for you. For me, I like it because I know that I have it. I can feel it in my hands. You know, when I'm using it, it's got weight to it, but I've got bigger hands, and so for me, having a pen with a little bit of weight to it is not a bad thing. You know, for somebody with smaller hands, having more weight may start to reach the point of being bothersome or undesirable. So that's something you have to take into consideration as well. The pen is postable. The cap is postable on this pen. It actually has a little bit of a kind of a snap to it. So because it's got that little trim ring on the back here, I think it actually kind of locks into the cap insert that it has in here. So that's kind of nice. So it locks very positively. Now, whether or not you'll actually use it posted may be another story, just because the pen is a pretty good size. It's got a lot of back weight to it when you're writing with it posted. So that'll really come down to more of a preference thing, whether you choose to do that or not. But at least you know that you've got that option. It is very secure. The cap itself snaps really tightly, and that's something that you're going to have to get used to. It may be something that'll wear down over time and not be as hard, but for me personally, I like to use two hands when I uncap this one, just because, you know, it could be easy to like really pull anything off of there because it's so hard to unpost or uncap that you could lose control of it if you have it with one hand. So that's something to definitely take into consideration as well. Wanted to show you some other pens that this one is kind of comparable to. The first one would be the X450 Jinhao. It's going to be a very similar size. The X450 is actually a bit heavier than the X750, and so it's about 25% heavier. So if you thought this was heavy, this is even heavier. But it's a similar size. It's got the same size nib as well. I'll show you both the nibs. The grip and stuff is going to be fairly similar, except on the 450, it's got this kind of triangular thing going on because of those indentations. Kind of like Lamy, not quite as drastic as Lamy, but a little bit. So that's one thing that really distinguishes these two pens over the other. And then the X450's got that gold trim instead of the silver one. So that's something to take into consideration. Now, the other one that I want to compare to is the Pilot Metropolitan. You can see here side by side how similar those finishes really are. The Metropolitan is very similar in overall length. However, the shape is quite a bit different, and it's a little bit thinner. So it's thinner at its thickest part, but then of course, because of the taper you have on the Metropolitan, it's much thinner overall. And then the grip itself is much thinner, and overall the pen is much lighter too than the Jinhao. So the grip is made of plastic on the Metropolitan. The nib is smaller. The whole pen is just overall thinner. Now, these are both medium nibs on here, but the Pilot one is going to be, oh, look at that, I got ink on my finger. The Pilot one is going to be quite a bit thinner because it's a Japanese nib. Japanese grind their nibs finer than you know, just about everybody else. So I don't know where the Jinhao nibs come from, but they are not that fine. So the Metropolitan is definitely going to be finer if that's the way you like your pens. And then the Noodler's Ahab, I have that one too, because that one's fairly comparable in size. It's going to be quite a bit lighter because you're talking about an all plastic pen instead of one that's all metal. And then, you know, of course, this one's a screw cap, and what's going to really distinguish this is you've got the flex nib with an ebonite feed as opposed to the standard nib. However, both nibs are the same size, so you can actually use the Jinhao nib in the Noodler's pen if you wanted to. You can stick Goulet No. 6 nib in either of these pens, and it'll work just fine. So they're kind of interchangeable in that respect, and they're in a kind of a similar price range. This one's $20. So I thought I would just show you some comparable pens here to the X750. Filling your X750 isn't really any different than any other pen with a and converter, standard, international, or otherwise. Got a bottle of Noodler's Black here. This is the ink that I tend to use when testing most of my pens. I gotta use it in the nib nook anyway, so it just is kind of convenient that way. You just remove the body off the back of the pen, remove the cap, and then you just take the converter and you push the plunger all the way down until it hits the back there. And then you just hold the converter. Now my bottle of ink is actually getting about half empty here, so I gotta really dip it down in there. You wanna get it so that it's all the way down up until it just starts to cover the grip section. That way you really make sure to get it into that filler hole, which is right up near where the feed meets the grip. Okay, so I'm just unscrewing now. It's kinda hard to see because the bottle's blocking the way. Okay, and there you go. I got some ink in there. Got a little air pocket in there, so if I wanna get it full all the way, I'll just expel it out. Fill it back up again, and that'll help to pretty much get rid of that. Okay, well, cut the air bubble down a little bit. You might have an air pocket up there, and you're never going to be able to get that done 100% just by filling with this way, but that'll get you about 95% the way there. Then just take a paper towel, wipe it off a little bit, and reassemble the body back onto the pen, and we're good to do a writing sample. So the X750 is a pretty good weight overall. It's not something that I think affects my writing too much. The whole thing is 36 grams, which is fairly heavy. You know, Lamy 2000 is 25 grams. A TWSBI 580 is 28 grams. You know, Lamy Safari is only 17 grams. So this thing weighs twice as much as a Lamy Safari. So that will probably affect the way that some of you write with this pen. But for me, I don't post it, so that lightens it up quite a bit. And, you know, I find that it's not bothersome to me. It may be to you. But anyway, I have a Rhodia number 16 dot pad here. It's 80 gram white paper, very ink resistant stuff. And I have my pen filled with Noodler's Black. And, you know, I find that the pen performs way beyond what my expectations were. Now, that said, I will say my expectations were pretty low for a pen in this price range. And so it's not anything that I think is, you know, anything more extreme than I would expect with any other pen. I don't know what that means. I guess just because of the low price, I was expecting to have a pen that was like super scratchy, really dry, and just tough to write with. And I didn't find that to be the case. I was actually expecting in this video to have to include like a nib smoothing portion to it because of how cheap I was expecting the nibs to feel like they write. But I was very pleasantly surprised. I will say I did experience a little bit of hard starting. So every now and then it will not want to start right away. It's not often, and you can see here as I'm talking and kind of taking breaks in between, that it's still starting up just fine. So it's not anything that I think impedes the use of this pen or makes it unacceptable, especially given the price. But it is something that if you are particularly sensitive to skipping or starting issues, you know, you may want to still pick up this pen but swap out the nib for something else, for another brand that maybe is a higher quality than this. But even still, I think that you should still, if you're interested in this pen, still get it and try using it just on its own and see what you think first before you assume that you absolutely have to replace this nib, because it's really pretty impressive, I think, for what you're getting. The flow keeps up. I know I'm writing a bunch of gibberish here, but you can see the flow is keeping up. And actually, one of the most surprising things about it, I'll zoom in a little bit for this part, but it actually has a little bit of flexibility to it. Now, I am not advertising this at all, and Jinhao doesn't advertise it either. But, you know, if I'm just writing normally, here you go, it's, you know, it's a normal medium nib. But if I really want to bear down, I can get a good amount of ink to come out of this pen. I can widen that line quite a bit, you know, light touch, light, heavy, light, heavy. So I can get kind of that feel to it when I want to. Now I'm really bearing down hard, so don't think at all that this is what a flex pen is. I'm really forcing this. However, if you want to just write normally, you know, then that's fine. And then if you just want to embellish one little word here and there, you can bear down a little bit and kind of get that without having to switch pens or something like that. So I just think that's kind of cool. If you're writing and then you just want to do a little bit of flex kind of stuff, go for it. Normally I wouldn't recommend doing that on a pen that's not meant to be flexed. But this is such an inexpensive nib, such an inexpensive pen. I say, what the heck, just abuse the living daylights out of this thing and don't sweat it too much because it's replaceable, it's inexpensive. And so even though it's not the main selling point, it was something that I thought was really kind of cool, just pointing it out. It's got a good amount of flow, even when I'm writing really fast, writing really heavy, it's going to put it out. I do find that pressing down, bearing down, writing with a little bit heavier hand does help to keep the flow of this pen going a little bit more. I could probably, you know, just really kind of press out and flex it, you know, a bunch of times over time and get it to just write a little bit wetter, flow a little bit better, just normally anyway, without having to bear down so hard. But I find that I just want to do that with this pen. I don't know why. But that said, there you go. X750, overall, very, very impressed with the quality of the pen, with the way that it writes, and kind of just everything all around with this pen. You know, I would expect that this pen would be in the $40 to $50 range easily. but the fact that this thing is under $10 really blows me away, and I hope that this information was helpful to you. If you have any other questions about the Jinhao X750, Jinhao in general, or any other pens for that matter, you can always hit me up on Twitter, Facebook, on YouTube, or on Ink Nouveau. So thanks so much for spending time with me today, and as always, write on.